If you're moving from iMovie to Final Cut Pro, there are 10 things you have to know in order to make the transition smooth and effective. So in this video, I'm going to show you each of those 10 things, and right at the end there'll be a bonus one to make it much easier for you to find your way around the interface. And the first of those is how to edit in the media window. And so let's turn to the computer and we'll just quickly show you how to do that. The easiest way to do it is you move the cursor, this red line here, to where you want the clip to start, and then you press I for in, then you move the red line to where you want your clip to end, and you press O for out. So you've got in and out points, and now you can drag that down to the timeline to where you want it, or you can press W to add it to the timeline, and it'll add it to wherever your timeline cursor is. Wherever you put this, that's where it will add the clip. So if I move it right to the end here, press W, it'll add it to the end there. So I could have added it to the beginning or any other point in the timeline. And then if you want to clear this area here, which is currently yellow, and take it back to the full clip, you just press X and it expands it back. So next, we're going to look at how to edit on the timeline. And this is probably the bit that's most similar to iMovie. So if we go to the timeline, we're down here. So now we're going to edit this clip. We're going to move the video head to where we want to edit. We've got this bit in yellow. So exactly the same way as you would do on iMovie, use Command B to cut. Then you move the head, which is slightly different to iMovie. You either move the head or you continue along to allow the head to move, but in any event, you get it to the next point at which you want to cut. Let's say it's there. Click on the clip, so it's yellow. Command B to cut, and you'll see the bit in the middle is highlighted in yellow. Just use backspace to delete it, and then you've cut that. Function 3, adding B-roll, and this is where you have masses of flexibility. Much more flexibility than you did in iMovie. You can see I've added B-roll here and B-roll here. So I've just dragged and dropped that down, and you can see I've got 2 layers here, but you can have multiple layers, and that's the flexibility you have with Final Cut Pro. And the advantage of that is you can start to do additional things like animations in a way you just couldn't on iMovie. The next thing we're going to do is transitions. And probably the key transition often used, I always use on iMovie, is fade to black. I use that at the start to fade in, and then I tend to use it at the end to just fade the picture out at the end. But where is that? Because on iMovie it's very easy to find in the transitions at the top. You go up to the top, you find transitions, and you pull down fade to black. In Final Cut Pro, it isn't there. In Final Cut Pro, you have to use this transitions tab down at the bottom right. You need to go to this transitions tab, and then you need to go to dissolves, and then you'll find fade to color. It's not fade to black, fade to color. So you drag it to where you want it to create the transition. Then if you click on the transition, you'll see up here on the right hand side in the inspector, this is how you can deal with it. And I've got it set to black. You just choose the color you want. I've got it set to black. You could have had it set to a different color. But for what we want to do, what we did in iMovie, you just set it to black. And that's all you need to do. You can expand the transition by clicking on it, or reduce its length. And so the next thing we really want to be able to do is titles. Where do we find titles in Final Cut Pro? Well, we go up here, and you see titles there. And there are a lot more title options than there are in iMovie. You'll see them all here, you can flick through them. Basic text. More importantly, you've got text that builds in and out in various different ways. Things that you could only do previously by not using iMovie itself, but by using Keynote and importing from Keynote, something that took forever. So you've got all these things now in Final Cut Pro. It makes it much easier to build titles. So here you can see I've added a title, drag and drop it down, put it in, and then you can do lots of stuff over here to the title itself and the text. probably one of the easier things to do in Final Cut Pro compared to iMovie, and you've got a lot more options than iMovie, things you previously had to do with Keynote. And then moving on to the next effect, you want to be able to add backgrounds. And you can see that's what I've done here. I've added another title with a background, and that's pretty easy to do too. So to do that, you stay in this Titles and Generators tab, and you go down to Generators, and you go down to Backgrounds. You have all sorts of different backgrounds, dynamic backgrounds as well. But if you just go down to Solids, that's what I've used here. I've just used a white background and pulled it down. But you have many more options than you do in iMovie. The next thing you're going to want to do in Final Cut Pro that you did in iMovie was picture-in-picture. And it's not obvious to find picture-in-picture. In Final Cut Pro, you have to go into the Effects tab, this tab here, you click on that. And then here are all the effects, different effect options, and you have to go down to Effects, Reframe, and then Picture-in-Picture, and you just drag and drop that over here. And you can see, again, I've done that here, put that effect in here. And putting a border around things is the next effect you want to be able to apply that you could have done quite simply in iMovie, but you need to find in Final Cut Pro. And the way to find it, again, it's in Effects, not in Transitions. It's in Effects, you go into Effects, and then actually it's in something called Stylize. So if you go down to Stylize, and then click through that, and you'll find something called Simple Border. That's what you want to use. You just drag and drop Simple Border, and then once you've got it, you can see it's in the Inspector window here, and so you can change the shape, the width of the border with this, and change the color of the border there. The next thing you might want to do, which you can do quite easily in iMovie, is change the loudness of your sound effects or music. So I've got quite loud, you can hear the sound of the sea is quite loud here. So I can click on this, you can see I can move it up or down to make it louder or softer. And that's the simple way to change the sound, just as you would do in iMovie. So the final thing I want to show you how to do in Final Cut Pro is cropping a clip. Something you can do, again, really easily in iMovie, and actually it's really easy to do in Final Cut Pro. You just need to know where to look. For cropping, it's this control here. Actually, it's got other options. You can transform as well and distort as well as crop, but all we're going to do is look at crop today. So if you click on that, you've then got these three options: trim, crop, and Ken Burns. Very similar to iMovie. So you can trim your clip to make it different shapes and sizes. You can crop it effectively to zoom in if you want to zoom in at any point. You can zoom your clip in, and there it is zoomed in. And similarly, you can apply the Ken Burns effect for this or for stills to give an effect of movement. The final thing to mention is you can use the Command plus and minus key to zoom into your timeline. And one thing you couldn't do in iMovie, which you can do in Final Cut Pro, is fit the timeline fully across your workspace, which is a really helpful thing to do. And all you need for that is Shift and Z. And there it is, nicely laid out across your workspace. I hope you found that useful. I hope that gets you going on Final Cut Pro and leaving iMovie behind. There's so much more you can use Final Cut Pro for, and we'll be talking about that in future videos. But for now, goodbye. See you on the next one.